Well, afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to this next in the series from our LinkedIn Live episodes, all about the rise of PCNs. What I was keen to talk about today was what actually happens on private land and what's one of the key factors that's driving the increase in the number of PCNs or parking charge notices being issued across private land. Lots of us will see in the headlines, lots of us will see in the press coverage about the growth in private operators like ourselves issuing parking charge notice to motorists for small errors, for errors of judgment, for a lack of signage. And what I wanted to delve in today was to talk about the impacts that both persistent evaders and repeat offenders have in car parks and the availability of spaces for those people who need them the most. As you will have seen from our previous LinkedIn Live episodes, we're obsessed about data. And as part of the stats I'll talk you through today, we've analyzed tens and tens of millions of data points. And I'm really confident when I talk you through some of the stats today, they represent individuals making conscious choices, not honest or innocent mistakes. So just before we get into the detail, as I say, our role in Agena Group for managing parking assets for our clients is to ensure that those parking assets are available and accessible by the people who need them the most. One of the areas which Agena Group focuses on the most is what we class as our uninvited parking market. So these are car parks where there's a specific entitlement to use it. So that could be a car park within a residential setting. It could be a staff car park within a education or a healthcare setting. But we do also manage the invited parking space, those publicly available parking facilities where either free to stay for a period of time or a tariff chargeable, so a paid for your service for the duration of your stay. And all of those settings are covered as part of the analysis we'll talk through today. What's becoming obvious for me is that link between the conscious decision which a motorist makes and the level of deterrent for not complying to those parking rules. Within the parking sector, we talk a lot about levels of compliance and non-compliance. And across the 5,000 locations for which Agena manages and all the data points for which we've analysed, we enter into a non-compliance process with about 0.4% of motorists. Or let me talk about that another way. We're achieving, and our motorists using our facilities achieve 99.6% compliance. And by compliance, I mean people using the facilities, having parking available when needed, specialist bays available for those who need them the most, and that parking facility providing a service without any follow-up action needed based on the behaviours of those motorists using those facilities. So 99.6% compliance achieved across the estate. That for me is a phenomenal level of compliance. You know, it shows to me a clear understanding of what's required by the motorist, a balanced and sensible approach being taken by the landowner. And for the vast majority of us using these facilities every day, we can use our parking facilities, go about our business without any interaction or interference whatsoever. So what I'll focus on now is the 0.4% of parking events which we manage, which we deem to be non-compliant. And it's that 0.4% which enter into the enforcement process. So we'll receive a parking charge notice as a result of the decisions that the motorist took to park their vehicle. Now, I absolutely accept, and I've been in this situation myself personally, circumstances can get in the way and everybody is susceptible to receiving enforcement action at some point or the other. And for about 75% of the people we've issued a parking charge notice to since the start of 2023, we've never seen them back in an enforcement process again. So 75% of people see that action taken through the parking charge notice as a way of re-educating them on how to park in those facilities. A lot of those people we have seen return. And I know there's lots of headlines about once someone receives a PCN, they'll never return to that facility. Our data suggests differently. Our data suggests once receiving a PCN, the vast majority of people change their behaviors, change the way that they park. It's seen as a re-education, and they move into that compliance process. What I want to focus on today is what we refer to as persistent evaders and repeat offenders. And I'll take now each one of those in turn. So repeat offender. A repeat offender in our world who is someone who consistently displays the same behavior. In this scenario, it's non-compliance within a car park, receives our parking charge notices and chooses to pay every one that they receive. Now, for me, that's a conscious decision to not abide by the rules being requested on site, to not worry about the consequence of receiving a parking charge, and actually then go further to pay in full the value of that enforcement or non-compliance behavior that it's led to. Couple of really quick examples. So since the start of 2023, if I look at the number of days that have passed and how many PCNs we've issued, every one of our top 6 top repeat offenders has received a PCN every day. That's staggering to me, is the frequency that people are receiving PCNs, paying those PCNs generally within that early discounted period, and almost using the enforcement process as a way of paying for their parking. If I look at one of our most prevalent repeat offenders, since the start of January last year, we've issued 129 parking charges to that individual. 125 of those have been paid, all of which have paid at the discounted rate. And the discount rate applies for the first 14 days following receipt of that parking charge notice. Now, for me, that is a motorist making a conscious decision to park somewhere which is clearly convenient for them on a frequent basis and to pay in full the consequence of not complying to that car park rules that are in place. If I look at the second one on our list, 120 issued, 118 paid, 115 at the discount rate. A similar pattern emerges. And we see this right across the country. What's most disturbing for me is some of these people are receiving these repeated parking charge notices for parking in accessible bays without displaying a blue badge. Some of these people are receiving these parking charges consistently for parking in an uninvited location, sometimes a residential location, maybe because that's convenient to the place of their work. And paying £60 for a day's parking in London maybe is more affordable than complying to where they should be parking. So that's our repeat offenders. A significant proportion of everything that we issue across our sites is going to repeat offenders who are now paying in full the full extent of their non-compliance. Let's turn our attention now to our persistent evaders. So in some ways, they're identical to the repeat offenders. They exhibit exactly the same behaviors, frequently returning to the same sites, frequently choosing to not comply to the rules and regulations at those locations. But there's one subtle difference. The subtle difference with our persistent evaders is they never engage in the process. They never engage for a cancellation or an appeal process, and they never engage to pay their parking charge notices. They have a complete disrespect for the landowner's rights, for the process which is implemented to enforce on their non-compliance. For a number of people, they now will have county court judgments against their name, affecting their credit rating, but that does not change their behavior. Our worst persistent evader, looking back over the same period of time we did previously for our repeat offenders, has had 136 parking charge notices issued during that period, hasn't paid any, hasn't appealed any. That's 136 since the start of last year. Someone showing a complete disregard for the impact and the consequence to other people. And again, similar to the previous category we talked about, many of these parking charges and other people like them who've received 120, 119 in that same period are parking in the most important spaces within our facilities. They're parking within no park areas. They're blocking traffic flow within our private roadways. They're taking up accessible bays when they have no entitlement to do so, not holding a blue badge. And all of those people are not considering the consequence and the impact to those people who need those spaces the most. Again, similar story to our repeat offenders, analyzed across tens of millions of data points. We see these people repeating their behavior on a daily and a weekly behavior, on a weekly cycle. And for me, what it shows is the consequence or the deterrent of non-compliance isn't enough to change that behavior. That repeated receipts of parking charge notices, either going ignored or paying in full, has become the most convenient way for these individuals to park. And for me, that has to change. It cannot be right that you are able to utilize someone else's facility and to pay in full the consequence, or to blatantly ignore what that individual or that landowner is asking you to respect. This is something we see across the industry. This is something we see across sectors, and it's something we see across all of our sites on a national basis. Really disappointingly, the proportion of PCNs that we're issuing to repeat offenders is growing. The proportion of PCNs we're issuing to persistent evaders is growing. In a recent study across multiple operators across our sector, we analysed around 3 million parking charges issued across different operators, different site types, different areas of the UK. What we found was not the 8 or 11% that Agena sees going to repeat offenders and persistent evaders, and let's remember that's 3 or more PCNs issued in that time frame, but we saw that frequency increase to 35%. So if you roll that up across our sector, and if you think about the annual increase that we're seeing of PCNs being issued on private land, 1 in 3 of those is being issued to someone who's already received 3 PCNs previously, is exhibiting a behavior, a repeat behavior in the conscious choices they're making to not comply to those parking regulations. That's the real reason, or one of the main reasons why we're seeing a growth on private land in the number of parking charges being issued. More and more people are choosing to park in a way which is non-compliant and to pay in full the parking charge notice, or to completely and blatantly ignore the rights of those landowners to protect their land. What's been really interesting through this study, and repeat offenders, persistent evaders, has been a topic of conversation for us and with industry colleagues and our regulators, both the international parking community and the British Parking Association, is what we can do within the powers that we have under legislation to affect these choices that are being made by motorists every day. I would really love to engage in a conversation with the RAC Foundation, the AA, the motorist groups, to say, how can we look to change these behaviours? There is a clear and evidential connection between the level of deterrence and the consequence of complying on private land and that motorist behaviour. We see it time and time again, and we see that behaviour increasing. We want to be in a scenario where everyone can go about their business, for parking to be available when needed for the people who need it the most, and to not see so many people fall into this enforcement process of issuing parking charge notices too. But what we're actually seeing is people increasing their choices of receiving these parking charge notices. And I'd really welcome from people watching today, either within our own sector, the steps you're taking to prevent this increase we're seeing across the board, or for people in similar sectors about how do you manage non-compliance? What are the techniques where you're managing customer behavior and non-compliance? And what are the initiatives that we can look to run? What is the awareness that we can look to raise to try and drive more and more compliance across our sector? Today has been a little bit of an insight, I'm hoping, into how significant an impact the repeat offenders and persistent evaders have on the availability of parking on private land. It shows, 1 in 3 across that sample of 3 million issued parking charge notices going to people who've already had 3 or more. That for me is staggering. This isn't private parking operators constantly issuing more and more parking charge notices. This is a growth in the parking charge notices in this aspect as a result of conscious decisions being taken. There clearly are other reasons why parking charge notices are increasing. And the other big reason would be the amount of land that's under management. We've seen a 5-fold increase in the last 10 years in the number of parking assets needing active management from organisations like ourselves. And we continue to see a significant number of sites being taken under management to look to manage the issues we've talked about today. What I'll be looking to do over the coming weeks is to raise more attention to these issues. And actually what we'll be doing is issuing over the next 6 weeks and introducing you to some of the personas we've referred to today. Excuse me. What I'd like to raise awareness of are the individuals, clearly anonymized for the purpose of this activity, but the conscious decisions that they're taking and the impacts they're having to other people and other users within these parking facilities. We all feel the strain right now on the availability of good quality parking assets, the availability of parking to go about our everyday business. But increasingly what we're seeing is the increase in the number of people who do not comply to the rules that are being set out, and the number of people entering this enforcement process, some of which, like our repeat offenders, who just choose to pay the consequence and repeat that behaviour on a daily and weekly basis. So I'm hoping this has been useful. I would really welcome some feedback from parallel industries around that customer behaviour and those compliance requirements, and also people within the industry. What are you seeing across your sites? Have you seen an increase in repeat offenders, persistent evaders? And what can we do to tackle this problem? So over the next 6 weeks, you'll see a number of articles, LinkedIn events, which we will be looking to raise awareness of this particular part of our industry. I'd love to hear some of that engagement. I'd love to see some engagement from some of the motorist representative groups. And I'd also love to hear from individual motorists who maybe are some of the people we're talking about, who are making these conscious decisions. Anyone who wanted to engage in that conversation directly, I'd be delighted to organise some time to think about and explore those conscious choices that are being made by motorists to enter into the process we've explored today. So I know through this LinkedIn Live, it's rare I delve into the detail of our sector, and we've talked more generically across what we're doing across Agena, I guess the priorities for me personally. This is something that I've personally been very focused on for a number of years. It's an area that really worries me. It's an area which concerns me, that we have the inability to control the behavior of these people who are consistently impacting other users of these parking facilities. And I thought it was only right to be very open about the data that we see, the trends that we see moving forward, and seek engagement from other people across different sectors and within our sector on techniques and maybe opportunities of how we can look to tackle this growing problem. So thank you for your time today. As always, I really appreciate the engagement. The feedback's been incredible over this ongoing series of LinkedIn Lives. And please do follow myself. Connect would be great through LinkedIn, and just engage with the content over the coming weeks as we look to explore further the behavior of these persistent evaders and repeat offenders. But without that, enjoy the rest of your week. We're almost closing out this week. Please do drop some comments against this article, and do message me directly if you'd like to explore this conversation any further. Well, thank you for your time today, and we'll catch you very soon. Thank you.